Thank you guys for joining me here on the last segment of today's show. And for our last segment, I know everybody had to know that I had to go back to one of my favorite topics. Legitimately, I think the new kickoff format and how it all turned out this year, and just back, I guess, last offseason when we were talking about this and how potentially it could change. This was something that I was very antsy about, very anxious about, just kind of thinking that this whole change I really wanted it to happen first, and just how it could change the NFL and, kickoffs and things like that. And I think for the first season, it obviously had a lot of success. I feel like there was a lot of doubts about it, a lot of hesitation about it at first, but I think overall, where we stand right now, people are pretty happy with it. I think people are very pleased to where it ended up and how it did change kickoffs, and we got it more involved. We had more returns, obviously, less injuries was obviously a huge part about it, and I think just bringing back more of an importance, giving the special teams more of an impact on these games as well. So overall, big picture, it looked like it all turned out great. But even though it was solid, we got to go back to how can we get better, right? Because the NFL is obviously going to try and make everything better, right? Continuing to improve. So if we go back all the way to December, when NFL Executive Vice President Troy Vincent discussed the NFL reviewing the alternatives for one of the parts of the new kickoff rule being the onside kick rule. And basically, this year, it felt like the onside kick was just taken out of football because, yeah, it was still an option, but it really didn't do much. I'm sure people will pull up options or examples of when it did work, but it didn't hit the same. It didn't hit the same. The onside kick, just taking the surprise element out of it was pretty disappointing. And again, it just didn't look the same. It didn't have that same feel really this year. So not only back in December when, Troy Vincent, the NFL executive vice president, talked about how they could change the onside kick rule. That was one thing that was mentioned about potential changes coming to the kick rule, but also we go to just yesterday where the NFL co-chairman of the NFL Competition Committee, Rich McKay, said that the new kickoff format will have a few more tweaks this offseason. And with that being the case, he said specifically one thing that the NFL is considering is moving the touchback spot back to, or from the 30-yard line, I should say, up to the 35-yard line, like it should have been originally. But obviously they kind of had some wet feet. They got some cold feet. Is it cold feet or wet feet? I think it's cold feet, right? They got some cold feet about it, and they settled on the 30-yard line, basically. Pretty disappointing, pretty, lackluster, because I know I talked about it, during the season and when they came to the ruling, that it should have always been the 35-yard line. They decided to play it safe, and now this offseason, they're talking about moving it to the 35-yard line. Obviously, it should have been already in place, but, it is what it is, and they're thinking of doing that to kind of discourage teams from just kicking it into the end zone even more, trying to bring down the number of touchbacks, obviously, and just trying to bring more excitement to the kickoffs, right? Which, again, I could have told you that, and I did come on here and say that they should have done it this way, but now it's coming a year later, and I'm almost certain that all teams are going to vote to kind of get this to move forward, because I think it'll be huge for the NFL and the kickoffs. But not only that, but also he did mention not only moving that spot, but also moving for the kickers where they place the ball. Right now they place the ball at the 35-yard line. Rich McKay talked about them potentially altering it to where the kickers move it back 5 yards and they have to kick it 5 yards further and move it back to the 30-yard line. But Rich McKay did say that they'll likely only do one of these rule changes at first, which is fair, I guess. It is very much like the NFL would do things. So I feel like they're going to just change the touchback spot first, and then they'll maybe get into moving the ball 5 yards back for kickers. But overall, I like how the NFL and, Rich McKay and Troy Vincent are looking at the kickoff rule as something that is a work in progress, that they are trying to change it, kind of experiment different things with it. I like that they are trying to make this better. And these two rules, I mean, if I was in charge of it, I would make these two rule changes in effect at the same time. But also, he did acknowledge the fact that you need 24 of 32 owners in favor of changing the rule in order to get it to go through. So I don't know how likely that would be, right? Getting 24 people out of 32 on the same page seems like a very tough thing to do. So, we'll see. We'll see where they go with that. But I do anticipate them changing the touchback. One, I think that one's got to be a no-brainer, an absolute for them this offseason. But I'd love that. I think that should already have been in place. And I also don't think it's such a drastic thing, really. Not the touchback rule, but for the kicking rule as well, where the kickers place the ball back, moving it back from the 35-yard line to the 30. I don't think that has a huge impact. We're only talking about 5 yards, and some of these kickers boot it like 15 yards past the end zone. So I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. That's why I feel like they should just have the option to change both of them at the same time. But, I mean, that's where they are right now, some of the latest updates on that. But also, the onside kick rule is another one where the NFL is still looking at trying to make alterations to it. They are still trying to improve that, obviously, from this year where it wasn't in effect really that much, I believe. And I'm still of the opinion that they should just have it like a 4th and long situation. I think that would be so... In my mind, I think it would be so cool to see that, like a team that's down, whatever, like 5 points or something, and they need like an onside kick to get the ball back and, have another opportunity at it. I think having a 4th and 15 or a 4th and 20 or a 4th and 25 option to where if they convert it, their offense just stays out there on the field and they get the ball back, right? I think that would be so cool for the NFL to do. And actually, the Denver Broncos proposed a 4th and 15 scenario a couple years ago, and obviously it never really gained any traction. And then 2 years ago now, the latest, team to kind of propose something like this was the Eagles, where they proposed a similar 4th and 20 scenario, but again, it really wasn't taken too seriously. But now I think we're at a point where we've seen the onside kick rule kind of be taken out, and I don't think it's so crazy to kind of propose something like that. From one side of it, right? From one side of it, I think it would be awesome, right? You convert like a 4th and 20, 4th and 25, you definitely deserve to keep the ball. And again, it's no guarantee that you score on that play, right? Some people might say that, it's more likely for an offense to convert it than getting an onside kick, right? You're just giving the ball back to the offense. But again, you're only just giving them the ball back, right? And it could be a 4th and 20, 4th and 25 from the 15-yard line. And if you convert it, you're at what? The 30-yard line or the 35 or the 40. I think that's still a decent amount you have to go to. So I don't think it'd be crazy. You still got to go down there and score a touchdown or a field goal or whatever. So I don't think it makes it too in favor of the offense. And also, I think it would be so just unusual, just unexpected, never before seen, that I think would be so much more interesting from one side of it. But I also, as I was writing this, I was thinking about the other side, obviously, and I thought about more controversy for the refs, right? If you get like a PI, if you get like a roughing the passer, you're putting more pressure on them. It opens it up for more conversations about, like the ref ruined this moment by calling this flag, or how do you not call this flag, right? They should have won this game if the ref called the penalty, or if he didn't call the penalty, right? There's going to be a lot more of that, right? In a very crucial portion of the game, you're going to leave it on the ref's hands potentially to call a penalty or not call a penalty. So that would be the negative part of it, right? That would be very unnecessary. We don't need any more controversy, right, with the referees. So I do see that. That's probably a pretty strong point against the 4th and long now that I think about it. But I mean, there's also the fact that kicking fans don't want to kind of have the onside kick be taken away from them, because kickers already don't do too much, right, obviously. So taking the onside kick away from them maybe won't be received very well. So you gotta stand up for the kickers too, right? And maybe you, instead of a 4th and 15 or a 4th and 20, if we are still going to include the kickers, maybe make it for them in a way that, all right, instead of an onside kick, maybe we let the kicker try a 60 plus yard field goal outdoors, right, for most of the stadiums. And if they make it, then the team gets the ball back. Maybe something like that would be cool. If you're indoors, you got to hit from 65 yards out. In no elements, nothing like that. If you're in a dome, you got to hit from 65 yards out, and then your team gets the ball back. If we want to keep it in the kicker's, kind of possession, in the kicker's hands, so to say. I think that could be interesting because 60-plus yard field goals are pretty electric as they are, right? If it's a game winner, especially if, all right, it would be so, funny to have a kicker go out there, again, for the notion that kickers don't really do much, right, in the game as much as, other players do, right? Obviously, it'd be so just crazy to think that the whole future, maybe the playoff hopes, maybe everything is riding on the kicker, the guy that maybe doesn't do as much as everybody else, that doesn't do as much as everybody else. The game is in his hands to hit this crazy field goal. It would be electric, so electric if he hits it. And if he doesn't, then everyone's going to be mad that, why is the game on the kicker's hands, right? Why is he the one deciding whether or not they get the ball back or not? But again, I think it would be absolutely electric if he hits it, gets the ball back, everyone's hype on the sidelines that this kicker just hit this crazy field goal. They get the ball back, maybe they go out and win. I think that would be pretty cool and just something of another option potentially for the NFL to consider, right? Again, if you want to keep it in the kicker's hands, right, not take away something else from them. But we'll see where they go from it. Realistically, I think it's pretty hard for me to believe that they're going to change it too much, but I would love it to be one of those two options. I think that would be great, but who knows where they go. I forget when their annual meeting is. I think it's sometime in June or something like that, but we'll keep an eye on that, any developments as we go along. But for right now, that does it for today's episode of the Chip Shot Football Podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. Please remember to follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media, and also especially on YouTube on the GSMC Sports Network channel and the GSMC Podcast Network channel, where you can find more content around this podcast with me as the host, Manny Maradiege, and just more coverage on the NFL, more NFL trade talks, all-season moves, and stuff like that. In saying that, I don't know how much longer I will be doing it. I'm sure this is going to be my last week, unfortunately. But for the time being, more coverage on the NFL, more talks on the NFL, trades, rumors, speculations, draft is coming to you guys through YouTube on both YouTube channels for the time being. So for right now, thank you guys again for watching, and I'll see you guys again, as far as I know, tomorrow at the same time at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to